Good afternoon. It's Joyful Christian Mystic, or that label will probably change before long, because I realize, it's like I keep getting pointed out. Things are pointed out to me. There's a mystic in each of us, in in essence, or in a stretch, or something, in a non-technical way. There's a hermit in each of us. There's I don't know, I suppose a theologian in each of us. There's we can all be part of whatever. An evangelist in each of us. Some do it in very more quiet or hidden ways. Others more out there, like the apostles. So there's a good in each of us. There's a little bit of bad in each of us, or a lot of bad. So it's, labels are difficult. Even just coming up with something for a vlog title, for video, for your handle, I guess you call it, or whatever. It's just sort of bizarre in a way to have to identify in order to try to express the basis of what you'll share. Or, some people choose a place or a topic, like a broad topic, or I suppose that's in essence what this is. I'm trying to narrow down to what it is that I am and that God wants of me. I could, be Joyful Christian Catholic. Since so many people think that Catholics aren't Christians, I could identify, or just string them all out, Joyful Christian Catholic, Mystic Hermit, Gardener, join it, link in some of the hobbies. But I don't really, I'm not really sharing that. I share the gardens, but not going into how to garden videos. So it's, just to let you know that it's by degrees. There's a mystic in you, or a spiritual in you. There's a capability in everyone that God will speak to you. You can have mystical experiences. See, that's up to God. It's just by degrees, I think, is what we get into. Some are more predominant, born that way, born with a certain a mystic disposition, maybe put it that way. And it's just there. It's there. It's nothing that you can make up or try to do. And so that gets us into false mystics. I came across one who was a false mystic. It was another Flora, and a Flora of, I forget her location. She went Flora of so-and-so place. And she was a character. Now, she had two brothers, and they were convinced she was a saint. And they demanded everybody consider her that. See, and now mystics aren't saints. They can be. That's up to whatever, really God. But, people in the church have taken that on. It's become a category. I think it's a shame to have these canonization committees, or, workforces, and some of them spend their whole life. That's their work of investigating and doing all that. And there's a section, a category in the Vatican for it. I don't know. We don't want to be going around and saying somebody's super holy when they're jerks or whatever, and they have horrible backgrounds or hidden agendas, or they're false, faking. But people pretty much know But why do we need that? Why do we need that classification? Why do we need to have it, like this floor I'm going to talk about today, I hope. Maybe not in this video still, because I have these other things I want to cover. But the Flora that was truly a saint, but she was she canonized. If she was, it was back in the 1500s, where it didn't have all this technicalities and expense. It's all very expensive. You're paying all these people to do all this work, travel to their sites and interview people, and I can see they don't want to get someone phony, but why bother with it? We have so many, and now I think they're getting a little bit contrived. They latch on to someone because of what continent they're in. Oh, we don't have enough from South America. Oh, let's do that. That's what happened with Rose of Lima. And in a doctoral study of her life, there were a lot of things that weren't accurate from that time period when they canonized her. But it was rushed, and they wanted someone to represent South America. They hadn't had a South American female yet. And she had been a friend of Martin de Porres. He had already been canonized, so, we better get a female. And she knew him, so therefore she must be. And they had these, the neighbors had said something, but it got twisted into something fantastical, a mystical thing that had happened. No, it wasn't mystical. It was just a shift of words, like how she got her name Rose. The actual event is a neighbor had said, oh, she looks like a little rosebud when she was newborn. And they came to first see her when she was born. And that got twisted into this thing that a rose had appeared and hovered over her as a sign from God that she was this pure rose. And no, that was all made up. But they went with it rather than with the actuality. See, so maybe if they revisited her now, maybe she wouldn't be canonized. Maybe she wouldn't pass. It's tricky. It's just tricky. And they weren't supposed to start any process within 5 years of the person's death. Let it simmer down. Wait. And mostly it was years and years later they would start investigating and thinking, well, this person did live an unusually holy life, and would go from there. But now, lately, 3 of them now have been rushed through. What's the rush? Oh, but because the people in the world were saying, oh, that person's a saint, and they were worldwide figures. John Paul II and Mother Teresa. And so they, couldn't wait. They wanted to appease the people, I guess, or it's really a big business also. It's a moneymaker. And the orders or the church, they make a lot of money off of what's sold. Even the canonization is a tremendous cost. The ceremony, well, the beatification ceremony, and then the actual canonization. And the travel agents are delighted. All the people flying into Rome, and in the hotels and in the restaurants, it's just great business. So of course, they're pushing these things. They have their little what do they call them? Their group, or their I don't know. I forget the name of what it would be, where they would push forward something to make money and have a anyway. It's just I just think let's back off a little bit and let us be holy. Just let us be holy. Strive, love God. Try to live a holy life on the holy narrow pathway and not be concerned about being a canonized saint. One that really impressed me is this little Charlene from Louisiana. when was she born? 1948, I think. But no one paid any attention until much, much later. Miracles and things, but she had miracles in the hospital the last week of her life. Amazing miracles from her prayers. Right there in the hospital. She was dying of cancer. This little girl, 12 years old. So, but there's, and there's a cause, but no, the family didn't push it. No one pushing it. It's just evolving. Here, what are we? 80 years later, 77 years later from her birth. Maybe, what would it be? 65 years later after her death. And I think she's a servant of God. She's not beatified yet, but that seems a little more reasonable. And she really, it was miraculous how God chose to use her. It really is inspirational. And her humility, just a little girl, she didn't know. No one even told her that her prayers were being answered that week, that she was dying and had died then. That it was miraculous. In fact, the nun and the priest who knew about it didn't say anything, not to the family or anything, until later, after she had passed, and other miracles were being reported. Friends and family who had, figured the little girl was in heaven, figured rightly, and asked her intercessions. And they were getting all these reactions and responses. And so it's interesting how we go forward. But, I think now they chose someone who fit in with the category and who was young. It represents the youth. And boom, all of a sudden he's canonized. And it just, I don't know, I'm not into all that. I'm really not. I like it when I hear of someone who's God has chosen. I always try to look to God for all this stuff. Now, that's one thing I just wanted to mention. And I think maybe in the 40s and 50s or 60s, in Catholic schools, this push, be a saint. And I think be a lover of God. Maybe that's what our title should be. There is a man from, maybe he was 15th or 16th century, and he went by Fool of God. That was how he identified, as a fool of God. I have his book. What's his actual name? Anyway, he chose to be called a fool of God. We're with love God. Love God. Love him so much. Everybody can do that. Everybody can love God. Follow Jesus. Live the scriptures. Live the gospel rule. And then whatever predominates of us will predominate. If we're born with this disposition of focusing on God a lot, thinking about him a lot, talking with him within, to where family, a mother and a father would think it to an extreme and want to socialize their child more if they're not Catholic. Now, if they're Catholic, they would probably encourage and say, wow, we've got a little saint here on our hands, and go for that angle. Yeah, but in non-Catholic families, it'd be more tone it down, be well balanced. But you can't squelch it. You can't squelch it in a person. If they're born with that disposition of love of God, seeking God, conversations with God, being a fool for God, give all for God, living omnia pro Deo, all for God. That's their disposition. And so I think maybe I need to get away from this mystic label. I mean, that's what I was diagnosed as. And I am that. I had to accept it. See, I was pushing it away. I was subjugating. I was suffocating who I was, how God made me, and what He wanted of me. I kept putting it off and shoving God away in that way. But yet, on the other hand, in the secret of my little soul, and trying to keep it from other people and from my husband, and I just loved it that I got married. That I was normal. I could be, and it's not that they're not normal, but it's a different way. I'm different, and it was hard to accept that. So, but it doesn't work. You can't force yourself into, what do they say, the round peg into the square box, or the round peg into the triangle. They don't fit. They don't. You just can't. Just got to be yourself. And whatever you want to call it. But I think for me, I had to embrace this mystic label so that I wouldn't push it away. So that I would accept how I am, because I haven't. So that this helps. But it doesn't matter. See, that, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't matter. As long as we do with ourselves the best and for God, live all for God, be for God as He created us, in the greatest degree that we are, in the greatest degree, the greatest percentage of us. Put it that way. That's why I say, well, there can be the mystic in all of us, Everybody hopeful has this great yearning for God and love of God. But God birthed them, gave them, when they were conceived, a disposition and a mission and a purpose that had a greater percentage of themselves and their talents and their gifts and what they were inside for other things, such as scholarly and even temporal scholarship. There's a need for that. God knows there's a need, and to educators of the world, of temporal topics in the world. The temporal isn't bad, not at all. It's when the spiritual of the church becomes so temporalized that people only, and for the most part, see that. So it's hard. It's because that can really take over, and it can take over, especially because many people are prone to the temporal. See, and then someone like a mystic, who's predominantly, that's themselves, that's how God made them, their disposition, they won't be. And if they get caught up in that, it won't jive, won't fit right with them, and it'll really bother them. See, that's why the source of things gets to me if it's not a holy source, and it's in the church, and it's taking over. It's becoming the norm. Like the diocese hermits, I did a little research, and they are the norm. It's the accepted norm now. You don't find the other hermits being mentioned or the temporal of the this new creation, the diocese hermits. It started from a very unholy beginning. Their purpose was not holy, and it was temporal, and they wanted justice. They wanted to be equals, they wanted to be recognized, and they wanted status in the church. And they wanted to have a canon law for themselves. They wanted to be legal, in the legal canon law of the church. That's temporal. The canon laws are temporal aspects of the church. They're not God's laws. They're human-made laws to keep things in order in the temporal aspects of the church. Fine, that's fine, It's too bad we need them, or anyone thinks it's too bad we're all not focused on the spiritual of why we have church, the body of Christ with Christ our head, and live the gospel rule. See, that would take care of it. We wouldn't need all these temporal laws in the church of, little things that priests are to be or do or whatever, or parishioners, and what hermits are to do, and what religious order people, give them this status, this recognition, plus, if you're really a hermit, you know what to do, See, the early hermits, they just did it. They did it. They didn't go around asking anyone's permission. They didn't, God called them. They followed God. They lived the gospel rule. They remained hidden. They weren't in parishes. They didn't have the sacraments. It's all spiritual they had. God provided all of that for them. Individualized instruction. So, see, just different. It's a different mode, different way of thinking and viewing. And someone like me, of course, always seeks God's view. And I guess I somehow these things, I just pick them out. Because it rubs against how God created me. Spiritual, very spiritual, very, very spiritual. And so that's why I didn't even know about this other thing when I became a hermit, when God called me. It had been going on. I didn't know. My spiritual father had never heard of it. It was this lady that told me about had someone get in contact with me, one of her servers or whatever, one of her people that works for her sort of in an unofficial capacity or whatever it is, her setup. Who's this other person who's writing a blog, calls herself Catholic Hermit, how dare, So, and then at first thought, she had to get me, I needed to be canonically approved, But the underlying thing was she didn't like the competition. A lot of envy going on, or resentment and stuff. So, and that's a shame. But I don't use that in my title anymore, hermit, because that was just a dead end. It's a means. It's a way of life, as I mentioned before. But try to figure, pray, and ask God. What is my predominant disposition? What is my mission? What is my purpose? Why am I here? And then do it. Fulfill it. And most, like me, I still have my temporal obligations. I'm going to have to figure my taxes. I think I'm going to pull through this. I think I'm going to get some energy back. And be back, doing some manual labor and plodding along, pulling through, trying to build up for colostomy surgery. That seems to be where the surgeon's heading on it. It is where she is, but she's going to do some studies. And I started this morning praying, oh Lord, maybe if there's something else that could be done, To tell you the truth, I think I hit upon it. I'm just so tired of having these big sufferings and just becoming depleted and then having to build back up and build back up and build back up to have it happen all over again because I'm a victim soul. I could have that be my label. But that, there again, that is not my core. That is temporal. It's in this lifetime. So yes, so ask God for what you're going to be, not only in this lifetime, but in the next, in the eternity. Forever, what you are, and what your role is, what your purpose, what your work is, how he is going to utilize you and has been utilizing you. And chances are it's how you've already been utilized. If you need help, leave a comment. I'll pray and, tell me a little bit. She says, I might help sort you through. What? I did unofficially someone who, and I don't know if it was correct or not. It was none of my business, but I know just little bits about the person. And like Koine, I can tell he's in his position that God wants. And will be forever. He's a servant. He's a cooperator. He's humbled. He does, and he uses his creativity. He's talented and hands-on, and helping others, and with religious focus. But not everybody will have that. It might seem like a temporal focus, but you put the spiritual into it. Like I go to the grocery, and it's a spiritual event for me. And my talk with people, if there's any little bit of way, if there's a connection, like with Isaac, the T-Mobile young man who sells phones at Costco, he and I connected at a spiritual level. And the second time I met with him or saw him there at the store, our Catholicism came out. His sense of me came out, my sense of him. And it was like a reunion of people that, always knew. He's very young, but, I said, well, you're like a spiritual son to me, aren't you? And yeah, So there's this connection that's uncanny when you hit it. Have fun with this. Explore. Have an adventure. The spiritual life is the adventure. It is the life. It's really the only life. And we just work around the temporal. We work within the temporal. We work with the temporal. And some, as I say, are born, and their purpose is to really work within the temporal, but as spiritual beings, like a medical doctor or a nurse or a CNA even. Doesn't matter what echelon you're in the temporal view of things. Connect at the spiritual even without having to say a word about it. It comes from the heart and from the mind with the soul, where God is. It's your whole being will generate these, and God will lead you into the situations. And yeah, you'll miss some of them, and don't fret. And then now the other thing just think through these things and get yourself in alignment with God and with who you are. And I think it helps to have to come upon the label that most diagnoses you. Most is what you are, so that it can help you accept if it's something that you weren't really, like, my parents socialized me for something else. And so this is like I have to break away from my upbringing, which can be hard, and then also from what people think too. See, that was part of our upbringing was, consider out what other people think of you, you know, how you behave, and all other people are watching. And you don't want to disappoint people or upset them. You want to give a good example always, and that's a wonderful thing, except if it's basically who and what you are is not really deemed acceptable. See, to your family or something, or to the others, if they think you're weird or Twilight Zone-ish or whatever. That was the Protestant reaction. I didn't even realize. I was in an adult Sunday school class in one of the Protestant churches, and later, this woman came to me. It was when I was becoming Catholic, to beg me to save myself from hell, and but also accused me of talking with the dead, be like the Old Testament, the sin of the seers. That would be today akin to the New Age readers, and and being paid for telling the future, fortune tellers and things. See, that's different than someone who there's a different focus to it. Might have seem like the same end result, but it's not pay on demand kind of thing. It's all God's grace with a mystic and God's will. and so the gift or the openness the person has to God, gift in that sense, or acceptance, or how God created them. Like I've mentioned before, this LS is very, very evolved. And her family, though, she's a family of mystics, which is quite unusual. But she's had the same kind of hardships. So she's not in parishes or at Mass. She communes with and is fed by Jesus mystically, because some finally get accepted, others don't. We're going to discover others. Well, like I've mentioned, a lot of the hermits, just their inclination to want God and to go out and seek Him. And then some did, maybe to find themselves or to find their purpose, and maybe they were for 3 years. And their real purpose was to start a religious order or help other people or do something else in the world that's very positive and wonderful. And so they were short-term, temporary hermits, to help find what they needed to be and to make that linkage with God. And through the hermit lifestyle, see, that's why it's a lifestyle. It's not a category of our being, what we are. It's a means for what we are to live. And for me to live protected so that I'm not spending all my time in battle with the temporal world or being attacked by the temporal world. So that, and then also to get the necessary rest I need for this suffering. So it's very practical. God chose this hermit way of life for me as a practical way of existing. It's perfect. It's great. God He knows what He's doing, doesn't He? So, and it's when I overstep and overdo and I'm out too much. I just about burned myself out lately. So it's why I'm really having to just get so refilled with the spiritual, so refilled with God, and rested up, get my soul back in calibration mode for me. And also the energy built back up to try to get up and to get moving again. Moving, in other words, to prepare for more suffering so that I can handle more suffering without just flagging out. So, figure out some of those things for yourselves. And know, though, that you can be as spiritual as anyone. Just might not be in the outer world, in the temporal world, your assignment. You may be a school teacher. Then yes, you can bring out bits of who you are in private interactions with the kids, one-on-one. The love is the mainstay for all of us Christians. And it's spiritual, spiritual love. God is love. If you're an English teacher, there's so much literature, that these themes will come out. And there you're teaching it. Other times, no. So it's just a matter of how God opens the opportunities. But I guess, we know legally we can't just start talking about God in the public schools. So, but there's other aspects of ourselves that will come out in that way. So it's all very interesting. Now, the risk-taking. I want to mention risk-taking. To be a risk-taker and figure out being a calculated risk-taker. To be to calculate, to figure the best way to take risks with our lives, with our being. And that sort of came up, and I appreciate one of our viewers became more concerned and be careful, you don't want to go off too much. Don't compare and have despair. Something to that was the rhyme. If you compare, you can tend to despair. Something to that degree. And however, in calculated risk-taking, when we need to seek God and go through and allow God to bring up things from our past, to analyze relationships we've had. For example, with me, I realized there were things in me, in my childhood, in my growing up years, in my family relationships. There were aspects that needed to come up to the surface and be dealt with. And we can't fear those things in general. Now, if there is something tricky about it, have a psychologist or a therapist on hand. Know of someone you can go talk it over with, or go to a priest and talk it over with. Ask for some private direction, or a minister if they're good at helping with things like that. Guidance, spiritual guidance. Priests are excellent at it. Most priests, at least. Older ones with experience, especially. But in my case, with what was coming up in these memories and relationship things, that I had to realize the reality, like how I'd put my dad on a pedestal. And these thoughts with my sister, what she had gone through with the breakdown, and then later, and how we had been close but we weren't. And I had to get all that up and mold over, analyze, compare and contrast, what it is now, how it was then, how they are with each other, or what which direction it went, but it doesn't mean that you're going to go into a despair. But you could, if you go off too deep into areas that are painful or get you down. But that's why, get guidance if you're heading in. Or it's nice to have a friend, a spiritual friend. Be careful, compare can lead to despair. And then you stop and you think, well, am I at all in despair? No, I'm exhausted. I'm worn out. I don't know, one of these times I'm going to have this exhausted collapse, and I won't be able to pull out, I'm going to die sometime. This dying was a combination, and it's still going on some, of dying to myself in various ways. Dying to my relationships with family in certain ways. Dying to memories that I had. Dying to my like putting my dad on a pedestal. Even I've seen him in heaven. I've seen him in purgatory. So there's no problem. I mean, there's love between us. But God wanted me to go through the process of pray, love, forgive, and then live your life. And also pray, love, forgive me, myself, for some of the feelings or the judgments I was making of how it was. And then I had to go through that process of understanding, why. I hadn't done that with my dad. I'd done it with my mother while she was still alive. I understood different ways why she was as she was, and this and that. But I hadn't done it with my dad. I hadn't explored. And so don't be afraid to do that, though. It can cause some pain, yes. And you can get down, and you can get tempted to despair. Stop at that point. See, I wasn't tempted to despair, but it seemed like it, probably to some of you. But I knew that I was dead, beat, worn out. And I didn't, and part of that, I felt like I was dying. And then, but God will, see, he works it through with you. So I was listening, and then one morning, God was like, well, you're dying to yourself. Just, okay. Dying to myself. I still didn't know if I was going to recover, or if this was the point in time I was going to be bedridden with the arachnoiditis or something. Now this morning I'm getting the feeling that I'm not going to be. But I've got to pray for the gumption. My mom would always say, get the gumption, girls, get the gumption. And buck up. I've got to buck up and get the gumption. Well, who's the gumption going to come from? Oh, God. I can tell I still need a lot more filling in. I need to just take a sauna in the spiritual, or take a day and night soak bath in the spiritual. Absorb it. Be like a sponge. I felt wrung out. And I think even the talk about the hermit, this and that, it's just so temporal. That the diocese, it's just so. Now I know that many of them are very, very prayerful and spiritual, and probably live the quote unquote stereotypical, whatever people think of them, far, far better than I do. I don't know. I suppose no one knows. It has to do there again with what God played, how we're born, how we're, and being a hermit, that can happen any time in life. It's supposed to, it validly more when you're older. Now, I know of a person who had become a hermit in the 2007, and had tried a couple of years before that. And now it's been pushed back to 1983. Well, that's really too young for a hermit. The person would have been way too young then. Would have been in 83, maybe 35 years old. Too young. So no, I kind of doubt it. I doubt it. But I can't analyze. I can't figure out other people's minds or why they do what they do or say what they say. I have a hard enough time analyzing my own. So I'm trying to stay in my own little bucket, my own little pot, my pot. So, because that video by Fulton Sheen was not Martin Sheen, the actor, but Fulton Sheen, the Archbishop, late Archbishop. He talked about different examples of pots in the scriptures and came up with a theme with it that's good, similar to what I was talking about, that we're all created by God and with certain attributes and certain dispositions and certain missions and purposes in life. And those can be shared by others too. We're not the only ones. So Jesus Christ was the only one of his type, God and man. Okay, so, don't be afraid to take risks. Just ask God to guide you and guard you. And be on the lookout for the pitfalls. If you are getting into a despair, get some spiritual direction. Pull back from digging down around into your life and into your relationships and into your psyche and your soul, and all that can get very heavy and deep. So just talk it over. See, that's what by my sharing with you my spiritual life, then see, this one viewer was to compare is to despair. And now, why would that person think that? I started wondering, well, why would he go to that mode with me? Because I wasn't despairing. I was exhausted, though. I still tired, but not as much. But I think the person, I recall the person did have a tremendous couple of years of darkness, a dark night of the senses that rolled into a dark night of the soul, and it was over an extended period of time. And even that just tells me that is a soul that God has destined for the work that the person's doing now. A person that woke up, the darkness opened up the great light, and he is service, God's servant, and he is serving religious sisters, helping them a lot, and anyone, and souls out there, people with disabilities, and having prayer group with them and different things. Bringing in people. He's out there bringing in the she's. He's bringing in the souls and getting them connected with God and with the spiritual of God. So he had a great mission. And I don't know, I haven't asked, but I suspect in that tremendous darkness and despair, felt like despair. And you can feel like you're on the very brink of losing it. And you can feel like that for a long time. I've been there before. Big turning point right after the divorce. And as my back kept getting worse and worse, the pain was getting worse. So, I mean, I have to, I agree that when you have suffering also, to physical suffering or emotional suffering, examining, when God starts bringing up these things. But I understood, it took a bit, over a few days, to asking God, what is this? What's the purpose of this? Always seek the purpose and the source. Then you'll be able to discern, is this of God and is it holy? Or is the devil using me and I'm going to plummet over the cliff and lose it? Lose my capacities, lose my mind, or have a breakdown or whatever. God does not cause us to have breakdowns. The devil will lead us right down that path. Whatever he can do to disrupt us and stop us from our purpose and mission in life and our seeking, and also getting cleaned, getting more purified so that we're capable of pure love more and more. It's a process. It's a slow process. It's a lifelong process. Most of us aren't like Paul. And even Paul, God sent him out 3 years of prayer and study and learning and solitude. And Paul continued to learn the rest of his life. He didn't arrive just in the moment that God, had the light shine and he, fell to the ground and was blind for 3 days and couldn't eat and couldn't sleep. And that was a massive turning point for him, yes, but it wasn't his arrival point. He had a ways to go of learning, and it kept progressing all through to the end of his life. It's how we all are. We don't ever really arrive. Not until we have divine union. Even then, we are never going to be as pure as God. We're always going to be learning more and more purity of God after we have union even. So, I realized that, God wants me to get rid of these. I hadn't recognized that I knew I loved my dad to pieces and had him on a pedestal, and I felt guilty about my mom. I knew that she hurt because all 3 of her daughters thought that their dad was the be-all and end-all. Well, we didn't see him much, And when he did come, it was, he didn't have a temper. He was very easygoing, but he didn't really stop her either. And he could have done more to protect us from someone with a temper. And part of his being gone caused her temper. She was working. She had all the responsibility of rearing the daughters, and he was the breadwinner, but she had all this other she had to do, plus fulfill her own mission, teaching, high school teaching, and use her gifts in that way. So she had a lot. She was very capable, though. She could do it. She did it. But she'd lose it. She'd get tired and have have her temper. So, and it wasn't just an average temper. I'd say it was, a lot of people have several faults. She had just had that big one, and it stood out. Other people knew of it. So, in fact, I found out just as an adult recently that high school boys especially would cause her to lose her temper in the classroom just for the heck of it, and then laugh about it. And that sickened me. It sickened me that they would do that to her. It was cruel. But kids can get cruel, right? So, and it worked. I mean, she would lose it then, I guess. So I don't recall when I was in her class. But maybe I was used to it a lot. So if she was on the verge or slightly into a temper, but so God had to have me see this. It was going to be something in the way of my progression. So I had to work through this. I had to go through, see my sisters, and then realize now just how much love there is. But I realized I don't need them to be talking with them. I don't need that. I'm too tired, for one thing, to be conversing about temporal things, because they're in the temporal world. I'm not. And so, it's enough. I feel my main responsibility would be to my 3 adult children or my grandchildren. And I'm always available for any temporal thing with them. But I have to keep boundaries or I'll burn out. And I think I was burning out. I don't know. I was just exhausted lately, and I'll have to continue risk taking and digging around and asking God, let it come up. Why was I so worn out? Why was I so exhausted? Besides all these illnesses, but I think part of it was in the mind and in the heart, the reality that every time I have a major suffering and a depletion, I always have to buck up, get the gumption, and build back up to try again. Get up and handle the responsibilities. And this time I so wanted to just have it be over with. Just either be bedridden, and it got to the point yesterday I thought, how am I going to take care of the dogs? I haven't had them to the dog park. I'm just beat. Just the idea of driving to the dog park when I've had other things I had to do, drive to the doctor's. And then that was just a waste of energy and time. And I got so exhausted there, I just had to leave and get back here because I had a grandson coming, had his birthday gift. I have a couple of gifts that I'm going to get in the mail to the granddaughters for Advent. I was able to give the grandsons his little Advent gift now, or last week. And I hadn't seen him since September, I think, before he went to college. So it's not a lot. I don't have much temporal interaction, frankly. But if it has a spiritual purpose, I really perk up. I've noticed that. That enlivens me and fills me. Like when he texted and I knew he wanted me to pray. And then I had to write and explain, that the praying isn't like, I can pray and God will let you win. No, I don't even ask that. I ask a favor, but I just pray for God's will. Whoever is meant to, whoever needs that for whatever reason, and God let me know, that the grandson needed that win, to break the bonds, to have the redemption from what had happened 3 years ago, nearly to the day, with a parent that made a very bad decision on a punishment that affected not only the grandson, but his partner, and the outcome of that partner's success then didn't happen, and the grandson went into this deep thinking and, trying to figure out, and he had already been sensing the tension in the home, knew that things weren't good, as he told me later, but never had thought it would be divorce. And so he was shaken. So he was dealing with all these things and decided, I think, to please his dad, well, I won't ever play this sport that he was so good at and loved, because he knew his dad hated it. Nothing was ever supposed. He's sensitive. He figured it out. So see, there was a big redemption. He dared play. Went on this trip with his mother. It was his birthday gift to go to Finland, and God gave him that redemptive gold medal, that gift. Well done. You've overcome your block that didn't have a holy purpose to begin with. It came out of a man's anger and hatred of a sport that he couldn't control his wife over, that his wife loved, and he resented that she had something that she was good at and could enjoy and was making friends, because he was introvert. He didn't want friends. So see, it was just all tangled mess. And God broke through, and he golded the moment, golded it. Well done, break free, you're free. And I don't think he's got other sport. He's a rock climbing now. He's into that hobby, and it's good, risk-taking, learning risk-taking. So, see, there's risk-taking in the spiritual life, people, and we have to be willing to take the risks. Just always hang with God real close. He's your safety net. He's your rope. He's your racket, or your, I guess, paddle, pickleball paddle. He's your rule book. He's your everything. He's your energy. He's your source. Keep it holy. Do all for God, even your risk taking, where if things are coming up, and God, what He's doing is trying to clear us of what impedes us. Not temporal, but it's deeper than temporal. It has temporal coverings to it, like wrapping paper. But inside the gift is pray for the situation or the persons involved and yourself. Love everyone involved, and love whatever it is, even the situation. Love the earth, love the sport, love the career, whatever, Love the temporal. It's good. Don't love something that's evil, obviously, or bad. And then immoral or things. And then forgive. Forgive whatever was impeding or whatever was causing you to be addicted or overdo something or not do it, or forgive the persons involved if they were involved in some aspect, and then forgive yourself. See, I had to forgive myself that I had my dad on a pedestal, but then I had to forgive all the guilt I was feeling for starting to notice here at age 74, even though I know he's in heaven, I started noticing these little inconsistencies of how he wasn't all so perfect, And then I had to forgive that the weight of how our mother sort of got all the brunt, and she wasn't as favored. See, he was, he'd come home on the weekends, and wow. And she would build him up too. I mean, it was always his ice cream. She'd give him big mounds, nice meals. She really took care of him. But she also had temper with him, though. She'd get frustrated. Like when he would play golf too much. And, no, you have 3 daughters here who want to know their dad. So stay home at least on Sunday. No golf on Sunday. And he did it, but would have, was itching to be out on that golf course. I would watch him before he'd be ready to go to golf with these guys, his men friends from early childhood. He had friends that he'd play golf with on the weekends. And I remember he would literally get antsy, like, I gotta go, and we'd be talking or something. They were visiting one time, but no, he was, half hour ahead of time, his mind was on the course. He loved it, and he loved his friends, and he needed that time. He needed it. Man time. I think he felt surrounded by women too much, and he needed that balance. But so he would rush out, and that was something I remember then in this analysis. All these memories coming up of the things that weren't so stellar, But he was human. See, God needed to show me that, and then to go through the forgiveness of even myself. And because I was feeling bad about having those thoughts, guilty about seeing, most of us would say, oh, the holy thing is to just see the good in others, just see the good. But what if there are things that aren't so good? They're in our memory bank. They're in our senses. We've picked it up, even if we don't let it come to the fore. but eventually it might come to the fore. And why? Because God wants us to be cleared of all this stuff. It was in there. I didn't realize these little things that I sensed that weren't quite right. I remembered another spank. He went to spanking somehow. He had to have things in control. He couldn't handle children that were, having fun or yucking it up and fearful that they'd get out of control. So that was a weak point, see. And I remember my little cousin Philip, we were 5, and he came to spend the night, and we were playing the top of the stairs or something. It's time to go to bed, so we were going to go to bed. But instead, my dad had to give this little lecture to Philip, this little kid. And I was so embarrassed even at the time, about, now, if you don't obey me, you're going to get a spanking. He used that was his only means of knowing how to control children, because he didn't have experience with them. And he probably was okay he did, because it wasn't a natural thing for him. And especially not girls. I think that was like, eek, the mother needs to handle this. I've got 3 girls. He loved us. He's so proud, but to actually deal with it, or any of the issues, it was, I think it scared him underneath. It was something that he wasn't used to. He couldn't really handle. He didn't know how to handle. So there was a, spank. And we had an exchange student. She was a senior in high school from Brazil, and she was difficult. And she told me about this. She's so embarrassed and really put out. She did not like it. But she'd been misbehaving. And I didn't like it. I didn't really hang with her, like at school and stuff. She wasn't on just different upbringing, and she was really into men and a senior in high school and a guest living with us, and that wasn't part of acting out too much that way. And I guess my dad took her into the garage and just had a private talk with her and said, if you don't behave, I can spank you. And she told me that. I said, oh, Dad, oh my. Not the right thing to say to some. I mean, she told another family, and she mostly then ended up spending her time with them. And it was fine. It was fine because she didn't like our rules, we dated and all, but there wasn't to be, it was a strange situation, just wasn't a good fit, I guess, but more promiscuous than what was our mode at that age. So, but see, so that, so there were little things, and we can't come to purity and pure love if we've got these little things that are inconsistencies, or if we've put someone on a pedestal who is just a human being, and I can smile and laugh about, sort of like laugh like, oh my, Dad. There's other means of discipline. Well, he did ground me one time. But this was another thing, but it was okay. I was told I wasn't to sit in the car and talk with this guy. I had this good friend, and of course he liked me more than friend, but I was only friend. And I'd be on one side of the car, and we'd be like in the driveway. But see, he had my mother as a teacher. Obviously, everybody had, who were in higher classes of English, sophomore. And it was awkward. He didn't want to go in and talk inside the house. And my mother was really sort of extreme on thinking, she was, and I don't blame her, but she could have just, relaxed. they were so concerned, wanted their daughters to get through college, didn't want any unwed mothers, any pregnancies. It was like they worried we weren't. Well, at least I wasn't. I wanted to get through college. I wasn't interested. I was very sensible and really didn't bother dating until college because I thought, what's the point in high school too much other than a few dates, but I thought, just wait till I'm closer to that phase in life where you'd be thinking about marriage. So, but, but, yeah, so I got grounded for a month and I didn't mind at all because I didn't, sort of got me out of the situation because I knew I was platonic friends with this young man, but he was really besotted. And, but I didn't blame him for not wanting to go in. And I remember one time I had a guy in, and my mother would stand up in the dining room and peer out. She'd stay in the dark, and what were we doing? Well, talking. But see, and these kids, oh, that's my English teacher. It was awkward. It was awkward, but it was like fine. So I remember calling the guy and saying, "Oh, yeah, I'm grounded for 30 days or for a month." So I said, there's really no sense in continuing this. That's sort of my way out. And I think my dad was so stern telling me, that you were warned, so now you're grounded for 30 days. And like, oh, I didn't say a word. I kept so much in, but, he knows now. Thanks. It's no big deal to me. More babysitting money. I didn't have to worry about being asked out. I could take the babysitting jobs instead. So, um, so anyway, that's just you got to get these things cleared out, and it doesn't mean that you're going to go into a despair. But if you're exhausted at the same time, it could seem like that. But it is wise to keep track, and I'm grateful for the person mentioning, oh, to compare is to despair. Well, maybe and maybe not. Compare and contrast is a very good tool for analysis, critical thinking skills. So and then you go through your pray, you love, you forgive, and then you live your life. So all is well with all of my family. All of that's done with. I've cleared it out. I find humor in myself, and I see the mistakes I made too, my mistakes. So I'm grateful for my parents being strict or concerned or whatever, even when they didn't need to be at the time, and maybe too stern. In a way, I think I went overboard then and married too quickly. And I remember telling my mom, don't say a word. You're always doing things to have me not date or to not stay dating with someone. And so I, we, get a ring. So my parents realize we are engaged, and we'll back off. But I should have listened to them then, to wait, get to know the person longer. However, psychologists have told me if you're with a sociopath with psychopath sprinklings, now they combine socio and psychopath under the same disorder, and a narcissist, they're good. The sociopath, they lie, they're charming, they're fun, engaging, they manipulative, and they know just what to do to win what they want, and then they start gradual control methods, manipulations and control. And once they have you, then the game is to have others and see what all they can get away with. It's very intriguing for them. Terrible to be married to one. But psychologists told me it could have been years before you could have known. As it was, well, I suspected maybe in the 5th or 4th year. Well, maybe even the 1st year, I wondered, because he would come home late from his master's classes, and my master's classes weren't that long. And then somebody slipped up, one of his friends, and said something about a woman that he evidently was dining out with, and more, I'm sure, now, but and even afterwards. But he always had these really good reasons and all, and they can make themselves very believable, and you want to believe. You get to that point where you want to believe it. So who knows if I'm just grateful to God. He decided he didn't want to be married anymore. He didn't like the restraint of 3 children and a wife. So that was good. Well, and I was injured. That's what did it. That he couldn't take that, having an injured wife. I couldn't be the slave that he'd enjoyed turning me into. I was doing it all. We went to counseling. I insisted we go to counseling. I was trying to salvage the marriage for the family's sake, for the children's sake, and for mine too. I didn't want to have a divorce. I didn't believe in divorce. It was a big thing for me to overcome. That in this case it was needed. But the counselor, said, "What do you think she is? Some kind of a slave? She's doing everything. What more do you want?" And and he would still come up with things, lies about me, in order to justify, because he didn't want a maimed one. And thank God, God knew just what to do to get me where he needed me to be. Okay, I let you be married, I let you have children. Now let's get down to brass tacks of who you are and what your mission is. So all this big opening of, he left in his farewell letter listing everything's wrong, and included it, he hated my mysticism. And I looked up the word. See, I didn't realize how you talk and all this spiritual. And I thought, what? Because I don't recognize it in myself, and I didn't. So, but I do that. And my sisters, my ones, she would, holier than thou and stuff. It can come off that way. So it's an interesting situation, and it's okay. Here we go. Move on and live as what we are, and be a calculated risk taker, and learn more, and doggies, Lovey, I'll take you out. Dogs need to go out, but consider, think through about despairs, and understand that sometimes you need to analyze and compare and contrast, and just keep your boundaries on it. Ask God to keep you protected from any kind of a deep despair, but don't fear. Let God lead you. Even the person I mentioned, who I think was in a dark night for 2 years, God brought him out. God brought him out. It's a hard experience, but I bet you would say right now all that he learned from it, and how much closer to God. We're not going to get through the narrow holy pathway without being squeezed. And sometimes squeezed as if everything's being squeezed out of us. So enjoy the spiritual life. Maybe I haven't made it too exciting for you, but it is exciting. And all of you know it. I'm sure you do. The people who watch this or listen to me yap, you're well into the spiritual life.